I forgot to change the photos. Look, we still got those photos from that nice sunny weekend in Tallahassee as opposed to the, who knows if it was sunny or not, weekend in Syracuse since Pitt played in the Dome, and it was at night anyway. We'll have to get those photos changed out for tomorrow. We'll get it updated, and so the Morning Pitt looks more appropriate for the occasion in the aftermath of Pitt's 30-13 win at Syracuse on Saturday night. It was a big weekend, folks, for Pitt. It was a lot. There was a lot of pitting going on, and not in that weird, like, colloquial way that everybody tries to basically take from Clemson and say it's about blowing games. Actually, Pitt won 3 times this weekend. Pitt football beat Syracuse in the Dome on Saturday night. And then on Sunday, perhaps the biggest win of the weekend, the number 6 Pitt volleyball team went to Louisville, who's ranked number 4. I think I saw the graphic on TV. They've only lost in that building. Louisville has only lost in that building 3 times since 2020, and now make it 4 as Pitt beat Louisville in 5 sets with Olivia Babcock recording 41 kills. Just ridiculous. I mean, she is an absolute killer out there, and, pun intended, because she's a monster. And any chance you get to watch the Pitt volleyball team, you should be watching them. Like, if you have the opportunity to watch them, you should. I sat at the Pitt basketball game yesterday with, watching the Pitt basketball game, the exhibition game where the Panthers beat Providence 81-74 after falling behind by 16 points in the first, 4 minutes. Or no, falling behind by 12 points in the first 5 minutes. They were down 16-6 and then 18-6. At one point, they came back. So, I'm watching that game and covering that game and reporting on it for Panther-Lair.com. But I also have open on my laptop the Pitt volleyball match because it was just that big. And it's fun to watch. Look, if you have an opportunity to watch somebody who's really, really good at doing something really, really exciting and fun, you should watch it. And it just so happens she plays for your favorite school, University of Pittsburgh Panthers. So, big win for Pitt volleyball to knock off number 6 Louisville. Good win for Pitt football to win. Well, let's say good win for Pitt basketball to win that exhibition game against Providence, and there are a lot of observations to make from that one. We'll have to save that for another day, though, because the bulk of today, the main point of today, is all about that football win on Saturday night. Pitt beating Syracuse 30-13, and I think in any time you break down a game, you're going to talk about some of the key plays, and then you're going to get into breaking down the offense and breaking down the defense. And I suspect whichever one we want to choose, this conversation will go in very different directions. And so we'll just go in all the directions. We'll talk about all of it. Let's talk about Pitt's win at Syracuse to get to 5-2 overall, 3-1 in the ACC. The first of these 3 big games coming up here. That we talked about even before the season being big games. Pitt got the win, and they are rolling on, getting ready for NC State this weekend. Let's talk about that game at the Dome. Let's talk about what we saw from Pitt in all 3 phases, really, because they were all relevant in this game. And let's get your week started here on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Monday thoughts on Saturday's game. That's what we always do on Mondays during the football season. We just kind of, a day or two later, take a second, catch our breath, and recap the game. Obviously, we had the post-game show after the game on Saturday night, but that was very late at night, and we were drinking, and we were all just sort of ranting off the top of our heads, and we appreciate everybody. A couple hundred people came and hung out with us around midnight to talk about Pitt football right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and I always enjoy that. We have a lot of fun with those post-game shows, and we'll have one after the game against NC State this weekend. That'll probably be around 9:30, somewhere around there. We'll start the post-game show. We'll figure that out as we get closer. But after taking a day, and yesterday, during the football season, Sundays are pretty much spent, much to the chagrin of my family, reviewing the football game on Saturday, going over the stats and the play-by-play, rewatching key plays, going through my notes and trying to figure out, okay, wait, what happened on this play? Who was on the field on this play? How many pass rushers were there on this play? And just kind of cleaning things up as far as the notes to really get a sense of what happened in the game. And after thinking about it for, the last less than 48 hours, 36 hours or whatever it is, depending on when you watch this video, there's 3 stories to tell because there were 3 angles of this game. There was offense, defense, and special teams. But within each of those, there's 2 or 3 stories to tell there as well. And I think I mean, everybody's going to want to start with the offense because that's the biggest concern. 260 yards of total offense, 2 touchdowns scored, only 1 successful red zone touchdown trip. I think they were in the red zone 4 times. They scored 1 touchdown from the red zone. Mason Heinchel, 13 of 24 for 143 and an interception. No touchdowns. He looked human for the first time, or mortal, I guess we would say, for the first time. He looked like a freshman consistently for basically an entire game for the first time. And I think there are a lot of reasons why that happened. I mean, he got sacked 7 times. And, wherever we want to start, we can start there. We can start with the pass protection just not being up to snuff. And, looking at the numbers on Pro Football Focus, I think Mason Heinchel was under pressure on about 50% of his dropbacks. 51.6, I think, is what Pro Football Focus judged it to be. And you say, well, that's too much. You can't give up that much pressure. And you're right. You can't have your quarterback under pressure on half of his dropbacks. But the reality is he was under pressure like that against Florida State, too. The Florida State pressure rate was right around 50% of Mason Heinchel's dropbacks. The difference in that game, what truly, the biggest difference in Heinchel's performance against Florida State and Heinchel's performance against Syracuse, and there were a lot of differences, but the biggest difference, I think, is that against Florida State, he was able to evade the rush and get out and run. And either he ran and kept the play alive and made the pass downfield, or he ran and scrambled for, I think when you took out the sack adjusted rushing yards, I think he had close to 100 rushing yards against Florida State. Against Syracuse, it was about half of that. 35 yards lost on sacks. Add that into the 23 yards he was credited with rushing, and you get about 50-some yards. He just wasn't able to step out of that one key tackle like he was against Florida State. And you could go back and you could watch, and there's a number of times, not every one of his 7 sacks, but probably at least 2 and maybe 3 of his sacks. It's one guy who gets a hand on his foot and trips him up. It's one guy who's able to get to him and take him down. And if he can get away from that one guy, it's a long run. So what did Syracuse do? What did they figure out that they were able to get to him and make sure he didn't take off for that long run? Well, one of the things they did is they blitzed like crazy. According to Pro Football Focus, Syracuse blitzed almost 60% of the time. Now, Pro Football Focus might evaluate blitzes differently than you and I. I don't know how you qualify a blitz. I count it as rushing 5 or more. The one time, I think after the West Virginia game, there was a really high blitz rate. But then when I looked at the game, they were still rushing 4 most of the time. They just so happened that they had 3 down linemen. And I remember talking to Jim on the Wednesday night show that week and saying, Jim, how do you define a blitz? Because I think you have to rush more than 4 for it to count as a blitz. And Jim said, well, I would say anytime anybody other than the down lineman rush, that would count as a blitz to him. So if you had 1 down lineman and that guy rushed and 1 extra guy rushed, according to Jim, that would be a blitz. Now, it's an extreme example, but I think Pro Football Focus might look at it like that too. So Syracuse was, they would have 2 or 3 down linemen, and so in that situation, if they rush 4, Pro Football Focus is counting it as a blitz. I'll go back and try and look through each of the dropbacks and see which ones actually had rushers of 5 or more. But I do think there were a lot of plays where Syracuse sent the house, where they rushed 5, they rushed 6, and just tried to overwhelm Pitt's pass protection and disrupt Mason Heinchel's timing and not allow him to have that passing lane or that rushing lane to get out and run and either keep the play alive for a pass or just to take off and scramble for a pickup like he did on that first touchdown, the 3rd and 9 play. On Pitt's first drive after the interception by Tamon Lynham, where he runs 36 yards for a touchdown. Syracuse didn't want to let that happen, and the way they prevented that from happening was sending a lot of pass rushers, so the pocket collapsed. Mason Heinchel had to move off platform or whatever you want to call it. He had to get out of the pocket. He had to try and run, but they had they had him contained because they rushed so many guys at him. The biggest takeaway from that, the offensive line needs to play better. There's no question about it. They need to do a better job pass blocking, and then obviously they really need to do a better job not having false starts. Kendall Stanley had 3 of those, and there were a handful of holding penalties. They had a bunch of procedure calls in this game, and maybe it's because they were in the Dome, but they didn't have that issue at Florida State. Actually, in the Boston College and Florida State games, with Mason Heinchel, the starting quarterback, Pitt did not have a single procedure penalty on offense. They had like 6 or 5, I think it was. No, 6. At Syracuse. So that's a big issue. The offensive line needs to get that cleaned up. But Cade Bell needs to do more things to help his young quarterback in these situations where an opponent's going to blitz. If NC State wants to come out there on Saturday and send the house at Mason Heichel all the time, he needs to have options. Whether it's screen passes, draw handoffs, quick routes, quick passes, quick slants, hot routes, whatever it might be. And maybe those were in on Saturday and Mason Heichel just didn't take advantage of it. I think there's probably a little bit of both. Cade Bell needed to give Heichel more options like that. Heichel also needed to take the options when they were there. But it needs to be a point of emphasis this week to be ready in case a team decides to bring the heat again. You need to have answers. You need to have responses, and you need to be able to adjust to what the defense is doing, what the defense is showing you. They need to get Desmond Reed healthy. I don't think there's any question about that. He played 20 snaps on offense, according to Pro Football Focus. He had 6 offensive touches. They were 6 handoffs. He was not targeted on a single pass. This is a week after he was the ACC Receiver of the Week for catching 8 passes for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns at Florida State. He was targeted 9 times in that game and caught 8 passes. Not targeted at all in the Syracuse game. That's an issue, I think. He stayed in to block more than he has really in any game this season. Actually, anytime since he's been at Pitt. If you look at the total number of pass plays Desmond Reed was on the field for on Saturday night and the percentage of those when he stayed in to block, it's a higher percentage than any other game that he's had at Pitt. So he was blocking a lot more, and maybe because Syracuse was blitzing, but that takes one of your best weapons away. I think he's got to be one of those outlets, those safety valves for when a team blitzes. Because not only is he shorthanded and he's a good receiving option and you can get the ball to him quickly in the flat, but also he can make plays like that. If they blitz 6 and there's only 5 guys back there to cover, he might only have 1 guy to make miss, and then he can take off and he can get a huge gain for you. You've got to do more with that. You've got to have Desmond Reed as an option. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think the trade-off pays off to take him out of the passing game as a receiving option and have him block as much as they did on Saturday night. So that's one issue. That's on the offensive side. I mean, I think there were a few bright spots. I mean, Kenny Johnson, I think 4 catches for 59 yards. He had 8 targets. He had a not good drop. He wasn't officially, I don't want to say credited with any drops. He wasn't officially charged with any drops. But he had one where a sliding catch that he really needed to hold on to that one. But overall had I think a solid game as a receiver. The tight ends, Malachi Thomas and Jake Overman, 3 catches between them. 2 of those 3 catches gained first downs. Kenny Johnson, of course, had what was probably the play of the game with the punt return touchdown. I have no idea what Fran Brown was doing. I don't know why Syracuse even entertained the possibility of giving the ball back to Pitt at the end of the first half or even just punting to them. I don't know what they were doing in that situation or what they were hoping to accomplish. They took timeouts in order to save themselves time, and then once they realized they weren't going to get anything, they needed to run the clock down and not allow the possibility of what happened actually happening. And what happened is they punted to Kenny Johnson, and he goes 66 yards for a touchdown that ultimately gave Pitt 17 points, which effectively was the game-winning score. Major error there by Fran Brown. Huge play by Kenny Johnson. Maybe the play of the game. If last week in the Florida State game, the play of the game was either Shadarian Harrison forcing the fumble and Jasir Whittington recovering it, or Jakarian Turner recovering Mason Heichel's fumble, which I think actually might have been the play of the game, then Kenny Johnson's punt return for a touchdown was the play of the game. And I mean, while we're talking about special teams, Pitt's special teams were outstanding in this game. Caleb Junko averaged 47.8 yards per punt on his 6 punts. One of them went 60 yards, just a monster kick there. Trey Bukowski made 3 more field goals. Trey Bukowski has missed 1 field goal this season, and that was a kick, the one kick at West Virginia, obviously an important one there. But he's now he made, how many did I say he made on Saturday night? He made 3 more. So he's now 15 of 16 on the season. Kicks on Saturday night. Not crazy distance, but he made one from 31, made one from 42, made one from 32. Pitt's freshman kicker has been outstanding for the Panthers so far this year. So special teams did a great job. Special teams did exactly what you need them to do, what you want them to do. And they were a big part in this victory. Obviously, Pitt's defense was the star of the show. Just an outstanding performance from Pitt's defense against a not very good offense. I mean, we'll call it what it was. Syracuse's offense was not good, but to hold them to 212 total yards, 76 rushing yards, 4 of 16 on third down, 1 of 4 on fourth down, 3.2 yards per play. Every stat you can come up with, 3 turnovers, every stat you can come up with favored Pitt's defense. And every stat you can come up with on Syracuse's offense points to Pitt's defense playing really, really well. Syracuse had 14 rushing yards in the first half. In the first quarter, they had 7 rushing yards. Total of how many total yards did they have in the first half? They had 74 yards in the first half. Just dominant performance from Pitt's defense that was undermanned, to say the least. No Rasheem Biles, still no Blaine Spires in this game. Zach Crothers is out for the season, and they just keep rolling with that next man up. Kyle Lewis goes out during this game. You've got Nick Lappy and Cam Lindsey surrounding Braylon Lovelace. And Lappy and Lindsey, Lappy started in place of Biles. Lindsey ends up coming in for Lewis once Lewis got hurt. Each of those guys, Lappy and Lindsey, played more snaps on defense against Syracuse than they played in the entire first 6 games combined. And they end up going out, and they each go with 7 tackles, team high, 7 tackles. They each had 2 tackles for loss. Huge game from those guys. You don't want to be in a situation where you're going without Rasheem Biles and Kyle Lewis for more than you have to. You don't want to be without those guys for long. But Nick Lappy and Cam Lindsey stepped up in a big way. And by the end of the game, you had Abe Ibrahim getting out there. Davin Bruton was playing. Emmanuel Taylor was playing. I want to say Kavir Baines-Marquez, the safety, was playing snaps at linebacker. I mean, they were in a tough spot defensively. That linebacker position has just been destroyed by injury. Same for the defensive ends. And these guys whoever they keep finding to come, be the next man up, keep stepping up and performing. And you may be a little bit queasy about that game on Saturday night. You may not be feeling great about how Pitt looked, and the fact that they won 30-13, and still a 17-point win, but not exactly how you wanted to feel coming out of that game. But I think there's some positives you can look at, and certainly the performance on special teams is a big one, in all the different elements that go with special teams. And then the performance on defense, being as undermanned as they were, to come out and play like they did and perform like they did, and force the turnovers and create the short fields that Pitt was able to cash in on. Both touchdowns came on short fields because Pitt wasn't really able to drive the length of the field, and neither was Syracuse. So on a night when Pitt's offense was struggling, Pitt's defense kept them in the game and effectively won the game by just never really giving Syracuse much at all. Now, you can feel really good about that, but they need these guys back. They need Rasheem Biles back as soon as they can. I don't know when that's going to be. They need Kyle Lewis back as soon as they can. I don't know when that's going to be. They need Blaine Spires back. They need to get Jaden Moore out there. They need players on defense to start getting healthy. You're 7 games into the season, and these guys keep dropping like flies, and I don't know why it is. I don't know I don't know who to blame on this, but it's an incredible run of bad luck. Is how I choose to look at it. And I don't know how you get out of that other than just getting these guys healthy and getting them back on the field. But at the end of it, you had the worst performance by a true freshman quarterback who was making his 3rd career start. It was the worst game he's played. Your All-American running back or All-American all-purpose player who had 155 receiving yards last week, touched the ball 6 times and only played 20 snaps, was limited due to injury. Your offensive line was kind of a sieve, and if they weren't giving up pressures, they were taking penalties. Your defense was down 2 of its 3 best players in Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles. I think Cruz Brookins got hurt and went out at a certain point in that game. They were down a bunch of defensive ends. All of this working against you, and you still win by 3 scores. And, is that a reflection on Syracuse not being very good? Yes. Does that mean that accomplishing what Pitt accomplished is any less impressive? No, I don't think so. Because there's no shortage of examples we can think of where Pitt teams in better positions that maybe didn't have all of this adversity, just had some of it, either the injuries on defense or the subpar performance from the quarterback or whatever it might be, just one of those things, and they couldn't escape with a win. This team not only escaped with a win on Saturday night, but they won by 3 scores. They took advantage of a bad team and didn't let their own adversity and shortcomings cost them a winnable game. And now we've talked, I said it before the season, what were the 4 most important games on the schedule? Do you remember this conversation? The 4 most important games on the schedule. I forget, I think I said Louisville. Maybe I said West Virginia as the first one. I forget which one. But the next 3, Syracuse, NC State, it was Boston College. Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, and Stanford. 4 most important games on the schedule because those are the ones you cannot afford to lose. Those are the ones you have to have as sort of a baseline so that everything you win, against teams that you're more evenly matched against, whether it's Louisville, which they lost, or Florida State, which, maybe the talent favors Florida State. Or going forward, games like Georgia Tech or Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame because we're mostly thinking about ACC games, but Georgia Tech, Miami. You want those games, if you can win them, to be truly elevating you, right? You don't want to have to beat Georgia Tech to make up for blowing a game at Syracuse. So I said Boston College, Syracuse, NC State, Stanford are the 4 most important games on the schedule, and right now they're 2-0 against that schedule. Game number 3, NC State's coming up this weekend. Another opportunity to build and, hey, get bowl eligible. There was a time not too long ago, a lot of people wondered if this team would get to bowl eligibility. Here they are. They've got 5 more games to reach it, starting this Saturday against NC State at Acrisure Stadium. They need to get healthy. They need to get more guys back out there. Mason Heinchel and Cade Bell need to learn a lot of lessons from that game on Saturday night. But the most important thing is they came out of it with a win. Now they're 5-2 overall, 3-1 in the ACC, and some of the momentum and hype might have taken a step backward, but it can be reclaimed. It can be reclaimed this Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. All right. Listen, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I said it on the postgame show. I'd really like to get to 5,000 subscribers. Like, we're close to that number here on YouTube. So if you watch these videos, even if you listen to the podcast, just go over to YouTube, click the subscribe button. Now, it doesn't cost you any money. It's not going to do anything to you. It's just going to make me feel better about my numbers. So if you could just do that, we're a numbers business. It's a numbers world. Like the video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And not just for my own vanity, but because then you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Because if you subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you can turn on notifications. You get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live, post new content, so you don't miss any of it. All right. Thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check out all our coverage on Panther-Lair.com. I hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. Hope your week gets off to a great start. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow as we recap Pat Narduzzi's press conference on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.